They say there are objects not made by human hands, but by hidden intentions. The mirror I'm about to tell you about is one of them. It had no gold frame, nor crystal clear glass. It was heavy, cold, with edges of worn iron and a surface that seemed more liquid than solid. It appeared in an ownerless antique shop, in an unregistered basement, and no one could say where it came from. It simply materialized, as if it had walked there on its own. What made it different was not its appearance, but what it showed. When you approached, the reflected image did not follow the simple interplay of light and body. It moved on its own. It returned dreams. It returned desires. It didn't show you as you were, but as you could be. A poor man saw himself surrounded by gold. A nameless woman saw herself applauded by crowds. And he who already possessed much discovered he could have even more. It was in this mirror that Arion, an ordinary man, found himself. He had never had great things in life, but he carried a hunger in his heart that was never sated. He had a simple job, common friends, and a lusterless life, until the day, by chance or destiny, he found the object at a forgotten auction. While others saw only an old, dusty piece, Arion felt something burning in his chest. When he looked into that dark surface, he saw himself dressed in silk robes, surrounded by wine goblets and coins scattered like grains of wheat at his feet. Behind him, a soft voice whispered, almost like the echo of a thought.
All this can be yours. Easy, fast. You only need to believe in those who have achieved it before you.
The phrase seemed innocent, but it carried something hypnotic. Arion could not look away. He returned to the auction the next day, and the day after, until the mirror was finally offered. No one wanted to bid, except him. For a few coins, he became the owner of the object that would change his destiny. That night, alone in his room, he lit a candle and placed the mirror before him. His reflection did not stare back with the same weary expression as always. It stood erect, proud, smiling. His skin looked healthier, his eyes more alive. And when he blinked, Arion swore his reflection did not blink with him. It was as if a different, more powerful version of him had taken shape behind the glass. Arion should have felt fear, but he didn't. He felt desire. The reflection called him closer, and with every look, something new appeared. Rings, cars, fortunes. Everything within his grasp, as long as he accepted the unspoken pact. To follow the path of others, to multiply as they multiplied. And thus, the seed of greed began. Arion began to test the mirror like someone trying out a magic trick. Each night, he lit a candle before it and waited to see what would appear. Initially, they were just small images of wealth. Folded bills on the table, a golden chain around his neck, a more comfortable house in the background. Simple things that made his mouth water. The strange thing was that, shortly after, such things began to manifest in his real life as well. It was as if the mirror didn't just show, but taught. Arion ran into an old acquaintance who told him about an easy business, a chance to invest little and gain a lot. He remembered the voice in the glass and, without hesitation, accepted. In weeks, he had multiplied his coins. The reflection smiled, and the more it smiled, the more Arion's eyes sparkled. He realized it wasn't enough to just invest. He needed to bring others in. The logic was simple. The more people who joined, the more he earned. It seemed fair. After all, he himself was prospering. But no one prospered like Arion. Those who followed him, instead of climbing, remained stuck on the same ground. Even so, his word was sweet, convincing, almost impossible to refuse. In the mirror, his image was no longer just that of an ordinary man. He was dressed in expensive suits, surrounded by figures that multiplied as if they were falling from the sky. Behind him, marble columns, illuminated halls, endless parties. But there was one detail that began to bother him. Each night, his reflection was becoming more strange. First were the eyes, which began to glow too intensely, almost like embers. Then the smile, which opened wider than it should, as if the muscles of his face were not human. The hands were long, thin, covering rings Arion had never bought. He should have been alarmed, but he chose to ignore it, because along with the deformity came even more wealth. And when the coins and promises are greater than the fear, who dares to turn away? The real world and the reflected world began to blur. Arion started to feel that the mirror was watching him even when he wasn't in front of it. In the hallways of his house, he saw his own shadow walking in the opposite direction. When he slept, he dreamed of glass halls and golden pyramids that rose to the sky, always with the same phrase echoing in the back of his mind.
All this can be yours. Easy, fast. You only need to believe in those who have achieved it before you.
Each morning, he woke up more eager to convince new followers. He used his stories as proof, showed gains, flaunted results. His tongue seemed enchanted, and even the most skeptical ended up captivated by his words. But there was something no one noticed. While everyone looked at Arion in the real world, no one saw the reflection that was growing behind him, becoming more monstrous, increasingly distant from any human resemblance. And what starts as wealth soon reveals itself as a prison. Arion no longer lived for himself. He lived for the mirror. Every morning, even before washing his face, he rushed to the room where the object remained. The candle had barely been lit, and there was his reflected version, even more imposing, even more seductive. The man before the glass no longer resembled the real Arion. He wore golden crowns. His skin seemed to be made of polished marble, and his eyes glowed like gemstones. Behind him, crowds applauded, revering him as a king. It was impossible not to desire to be that man. It was impossible to resist the call. In the physical world, Arion had already brought dozens of people into the business. Each of them, seduced by his words, handed over their savings, believing they, too, would climb the infinite ladder of prosperity. But, strangely, the more people fell, the higher Arion climbed. He always had a new car, a new watch, a new feast to display. The others, however, only accumulated debts and frustrations. Still, no one accused him, because Arion seemed the living proof that it worked. Except there was something no one saw. The reflection. Every time Arion looked into the glass, the scene was more disturbing. The reflected jewels were no longer beautiful. They looked like molten, twisted glass, dripping as if they were still glowing embers. The banquets, once plentiful, were now dark masses that moved on their own, emitting strange, almost organic sounds. The wine goblets reflected not drink, but a thick, red liquid that seemed to pulse as if it had a heart of its own. And his face, oh, the face. In the reflection, Arion was no longer himself. His features were elongated, his teeth too sharp, his eyes wide and brilliant like headlights on a moonless night. His body was becoming a grotesque caricature of what he desired to be. A king of riches, but a king without a soul, molded by his own appetite. Arion should have felt repulsion, but he couldn't, because the more grotesque the reflection became, the more powerful he seemed. And the addiction set in. Arion no longer slept properly. He spent hours before the mirror, trying to capture every detail, every promise. His skin began to lose its luster. His eyes were always red, but nothing mattered, because the reflection always seemed to offer the same guarantee. In the next round, the true gold, the true triumph would come. He spoke of nothing else to his friends. He was like a preacher, announcing a faith that only he seemed to fully live. He convinced neighbors, siblings, even strangers on the street. Each new recruit increased the reflected glory, and with each new follower, his reflection grew in majesty and in monstrosity. But Something began to change in the air. The people he convinced did not meet good ends. Many disappeared. Others lost everything and returned to confront him, their eyes full of hatred and despair. Arion, however, seemed untouchable. He kept prospering. He kept shining. He continued to be the living image of success. Except inside the mirror, the crowd that applauded him began to writhe. Their faces were no longer of admiration, but of supplication. They weren't clapping. They were extending their hands, begging for something, as if shouting without sound, as if they wanted to escape. Arion noticed, but he pretended not to, because deep down it was already too late. He didn't just want wealth. He wanted more, always more, and the mirror knew it. The crack began almost imperceptibly. One random morning, Arion lit the candle before the mirror and noticed something had changed. For the first time, there was no gold reflected. There were no palaces, nor crowds of applause. The reflection showed only an empty, dark room, with a chill that seemed to pass through the glass and take over the real environment. He approached, curious and nervous. The reflection did the same, but there was a delay, a slight delay, as if the figure on the other side hesitated. Arion frowned. That had never happened, until, slowly, the reflection opened its mouth, and then the applause returned. But not as before. Behind the reflection, a crowd appeared. They were no longer smiling men and women cheering for his wealth. They were pale, skeletal people with hollow eyes, faces Arion knew, faces of neighbors, friends, acquaintances, all those who had believed him and lost everything. They were there, piled up behind the glass, trying to reach the surface, like drowning people knocking against a submerged window. Arion's heart pounded, but he didn't turn away. He got even closer, until he felt the cold of the surface on the tip of his nose. And it was at that instant he realized his reflection was not smiling. It was not the monstrous caricature that had been growing night after night. It was a face identical to his, but crying. The tears ran thick, as if they were made of liquid iron. Arion backed away, but the voice echoed again.
All this can be yours. Easy, fast. You only need to believe in those who have achieved it before you.
This time, the voice did not sound seductive. It was a desperate scream, a lament trapped between worlds. The room filled with a buzzing, as if hundreds of voices repeated the phrase in chorus, louder and louder, more and more oppressive. He covered his ears, but it was no use. The sound was inside him. The mirror began to tremble. The candles extinguished themselves. And in the reflection, the hands of the crowd began to move, pressing the glass from within, trying to break the barrier. The deformed faces collided with the surface, leaving marks, stains, as if the very matter of the mirror was malleable. Arion took a step back, but felt the floor give way. It was as if he was being pulled, as if the entire space around him spun toward the object. He tried to resist, tried to look away, but couldn't. The mirror was a magnet, and he was a fragile iron about to be swallowed. And then it happened. The reflection reached out its hand. A cold, gray hand passed through the surface as if it were water. Before Arion could react, the long, icy fingers grabbed his arm with force. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The crowd on the other side roared in silence, and Arion's reflection, the one that was crying, now smiled with profound hatred. In a violent pull, the glass swallowed him. That night, neighbors heard a crash coming from Arion's house. When they went to check, they found only a broken mirror on the floor. His body was never found, but they say that if you collect the shards of that glass and dare to look into them, something far worse than your reflection might answer. After that night, no one ever saw Arion again. Neither family, nor friends, nor neighbors. Some swore he had fled, taking everyone's money with him. Others said he'd been found by the very people he deceived and that his luck had run out. But those who entered the house, they never forgot what they saw. In the center of the room, where the mirror once stood, there were only fragments scattered across the floor. They reflected nothing. They didn't even show the face of the person who approached. They were dark, dead pieces, as if they had sucked all the light around them. Still, whoever dared to touch them described the same sensation, a shiver that ran up their spine, a muffled whisper, always repeating the same phrase.
All this can be yours. Easy, fast. You only need to believe in those who have achieved it before you.
And each time the phrase echoed, the voices became clearer. It wasn't just one. There were dozens, hundreds, all mixed in a suffocating chorus. Many recognized, amidst them, familiar tones. People who've been lost in scams, in promises of easy wealth, in pyramids that only climbed until they collapsed. It was as if every lost voice in the world had joined inside that mirror. Some say Arion didn't die, that he is trapped on the other side, that his cry of reflection was not a warning, but a plea for help, too late to be answered. But some go further. They guarantee that the mirror hasn't disappeared. It merely changes location. It appears in antique shops, fairs, forgotten markets. Always ownerless, always waiting for someone with hunger in their eyes. And the story repeats itself. The curious glance, the quick promise, the irresistible seduction. In the beginning, it's just a chance to multiply. In the end, it's a life swallowed. The most frightening thing is that the mirror doesn't need to be in front of you. It can be on a screen, in an eye-catching advertisement, in a promise of a return too impossible to believe, and yet believed. The surface has changed, but the mechanism is the same. To show easy wealth, to create reflections of what you desire most, until the distortion becomes irreversible. Because deep down, the mirror is not made of glass. It is made of greed. And as long as there is someone willing to believe in shortcuts, it will never truly break. It will only rebuild itself in the next promise, the next scam, on the next hungry face before a glowing screen. And if by chance you catch yourself looking into something that shows exactly what you've always wanted, beware. It might not be a reflection. It might be the mirror opening the door.
Reaching the end means you've seen more than most, but don't leave just yet. The most valuable part is coming now. Watch the credits to uncover today's lesson. Stay, like, and subscribe, because this is where everything connects. And so, the tale becomes a lesson. Now, let's learn how to break the curse.
A final entry. Scams and pyramid schemes. We've talked about the forces that act in the world of finance. Inflation, which destroys, compound interest, which builds, and credit, which can do both. Now, let's talk about a predator, a real predator that uses your trust and your dreams to feed itself. Let's sit down for a moment. Forget the promises of easy wealth and the photos of expensive cars. Imagine the following scene. A group of people gathers in a hall. All of them carry a seed of hope in their hands. A leader, charismatic and convincing, appears and says, "I know a secret garden. If you give me your seed, I will plant it, and in a short time, it will turn into a tree with golden fruit." You hand over your seed. The leader takes it to the garden, and shortly after, gives you a golden fruit in return. You are amazed and tell your friends and family. They also want their share and give their seeds to the leader, who gives them a golden fruit. This is a pyramid scheme, a fraud that pretends to have a solid basis of production, but actually has none. It only works because new people with new seeds keep joining. What the leader is really doing is using the seeds your friend just gave him to give you your golden fruit. There is no secret garden. There is no golden tree. There is only the theft of seeds from new people to pay the rewards of older people. And just like a real pyramid, it can only grow up to a certain point. When there are no more seeds, new people, to deceive, the entire structure collapses. The last ones to join lose everything, and the leader is the first to harvest the seeds, disappear with your fortune. And what's the big lesson? A pyramid scheme is not about money. It's about emotion. It feeds on your greed, your hope for a shortcut, your trust in the wrong person. It disguises itself as an opportunity, but deep down it's a pact of betrayal. Your best shield against this type of predator is a simple question. Where does the money come from? If the answer is not in producing something of value, selling a real product, or providing an honest service, but rather in the promise that new people will join run. Remember, in the world of finance, the quickest shortcut to wealth is usually the shortest path to ruin.